Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our virtual town hall series. This is the second in the series that will be going on for a little over a week with various audiences. We're happy to have you here. Our goal today is to give you as much information as possible during this uncertain time. I am Renee Kapkowski, Vice President of Institute Communications, and I have with us today President Cabrera, Rafael Bras, Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Shawi Abdallah, the Executive Vice President for Research, Kelly Fox, our Executive Vice President for Administration and Finance, and Kim Harrington, our Assistant VP and Chief Human Resources Officer. We're going to open today with a few opening remarks and then move into the questions that were pre-submitted in advance, as well as those that you might want to put into the chat function or question and answer function here on Microsoft Teams. One thing to make Microsoft Teams work a little better for you is if you will log out of the VPN. You will find that the sound gets a little better and there's a little less of a lag. We chose this platform because it does support the most number of attendees, and it's been working well so far, but please let us know if something's not working and we'll try to address it during the session. We will also record it and put out the FAQs after the fact on the Georgia Tech COVID-19 website. So with that, I'll turn it over to President Cabrera.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Renee, and your team for setting this up. And let me start by sharing my thoughts and my sympathy with anyone in our community who may be suffering of this disease, of this COVID-19 disease, or who may have anybody at home who is. This disease is a serious health threat, as we all know. It has hit us pretty closely. There has been some painful cases already in our community, and I know that those of you who are dealing with it personally or in your families, it might be a stressful time, and I hope you're taking good care of yourselves. And most importantly, I guess a reminder. I know we've all heard this before, but I think it's never, we can't hear it enough that it's up to all of us to make sure that we keep this pandemic under control. I think the actions that we've collectively taken seem to be working. Both the actions that have been taken on a policy level, but very importantly, the actions that each of us has taken are making a difference. And that includes, of course, staying away from other people, staying at home for those of us who can stay at home, wash our hands constantly, protecting ourselves when we must be in contact with others, maintaining a good distance. By doing all of that, we have seen that famous curve that has indeed flattened, and has contributed to keeping more of our healthcare resources available, and it has really helped. It is helping save lives. So I encourage all of us to continue to do just that. I want to thank all of you for what you've done so far to keep our community safe and to keep our students continue to make progress. And I don't take it for granted. We should not take it for granted. What we have accomplished together so far in just a few weeks is nothing short of extraordinary. And I want to thank both those of you who have been able to take your work home, but also very importantly, those of you who are still on campus, making sure that all the basic services are taken care of. I know that those of you who've taken your work home have had to face all sorts of different circumstances, and in many cases it hasn't been easy. And many of you have young children or older adults that you're taking care of at home. You've had to reorganize your lives and figuring out how to deal with all the issues at home, and yet manage to get the work done in an entirely different way, using technology, and yet not managing to somehow finding creative ways to get the job done. Really appreciate all that creativity and dedication to your jobs. And by doing that, by leaving campus and doing your work from a distance, not only you're keeping your family safe, you're also helping those people who are still on campus, who have to be on campus because of the nature of their jobs. It is essential that we lower the density of people on our campus, and so everybody's contributing to that. But let me thank those of you who are still on campus, whether it's working on a whole variety of student services or maintaining some minimum services on the research side, or our police department to keep us all safe. Police department, for example, has played a very important role in this new testing site that has been established in partnership with CVS on our campus, and that is doing almost 1,000 tests every day in service of the broad community, the folks in housing and all sorts of student services. I really appreciate what you're doing to serve the institution and serve the institution, our students. The strategy so far has been very clear. I mean, we had to lower, as I said, the density, the number of people on our campus to minimize the chances of encounter, lower the probability of contagion. And that, of course, required that we ask the students to leave campus. It's been a massive operation in barely 2 weeks to have almost 90% or more of our students to check out and leave and move out. And for many of them to have to come back and to organize all that logistics to make sure that families moving out would not congregate on the same days. I mean, I realize it's been just a major operation, and I thank everybody who's been involved in doing that. And then at the same time, we've had to take all the business processes and transform in a way that can be conducted from a distance, and very importantly, to convert all of our instruction online. Again, we've never seen anything like this in our professional lives. If anyone had asked us even just 3 months ago, would it be possible, hypothetically, would it be possible for an institution as large and complex as Georgia Tech, without notice, in just a period of 2 weeks, to transform all of our instruction and take it online? Would that be possible? I think the answer would have been no, that's not possible. It would take years of planning to do something like that. And yet, when it was necessary, when it had to be done, it got done. And our faculty have done an absolutely extraordinary job to rethink how they're going to conduct their classes. The staff has provided a lot of support. And then the rest of us have figured out ways to continue to serve the students, to continue to conduct all the processes, all the business processes for this to work. Again, nothing short of extraordinary. In every one of you has had a big part of being able to do that, and it's just absolutely remarkable. Now, we're now at a point where we need to start pivoting our thinking from transforming our operation, again, in a historic way. For the first time in our history, we're not teaching any classes on campus, to now start thinking about, okay, how are we going to go back at some point in the near future, hopefully, how are we going to go back to our campus? And that's not easy, because there are many more questions than answers, as much as we're working with scientists and global and national and state organizations to try to figure out what might be ahead of us. No one really knows. So all we can do is start thinking about possible scenarios and try to be ready in case one of these scenarios ends up being the one that we face. But once again, we've never gone through this, so we're going to continue to have to be creative, innovative, and also patient and understanding and dealing with uncertainty. Now, in addition to sort of the immediate impact in the life of Georgia Tech and the immediate impact in our academic side and our business side, I think that the next wave of impact of the pandemic is going to have, that is already having, is going to be on the economic side. And projections from the International Monetary Fund and others already, even at the national level, really are predicting that there's going to be a significant contraction of the economy. We already have seen historically high unemployment claims. Very likely tax revenues are going to be impacted, and of course a big part of our revenues, over $300 million every year, come from a state appropriation. So we don't know yet. The government hasn't given us, the state government hasn't given us exact indications, but it's very, very likely that we're going to also be affected by that. And so when the health crisis, if you will, starts subsiding, we're still going to have to deal with the economic impact that this is having at Georgia Tech and in our broader community. And yet, with all this complexity of what this thing has done in the way we conduct our business and in the way it has affected our families, as personally our students, I look at this with a great sense of optimism and a great sense of confidence. I think we are making progress, as I said, at a community level. I think these actions, these policy actions, are helping us keep the curve low and help us deal as well as possible. Right now, the numbers, even though yesterday we had a record high number of deaths on a national level, really these numbers are lower than the original projections. So it really, when we put ourselves to it as a community and on a national level, I think we have shown that we can keep things under control. So we are, as I said, we are facing lots of unknowns, and yet I feel like the very same principles and the same values that have helped us get to this point successfully are really going to help us move forward. And as you know, and some of you have participated over the last 6 months into this visioning exercise and strategic planning. And we spent a lot of time talking about our values, talking about what is it that, what are those shared beliefs, the way that we as a community want to operate, the way that has distinguished Georgia Tech throughout the years and that we think is going to help us move forward. And those values are very, very relevant for the situation we're facing today. And I won't go through all of them, but think about the students as our top priority. I mean, whatever we do, we have to keep in mind, how do we keep our students continue to learn and make academic progress? The fact that we celebrate collaboration, everything that we've done so far has been by people not saying, "No, that's not my job." On the contrary, by thinking, "How can I help you do your job?" And everything we've accomplished has been done through collaboration. We champion innovation. Think about the amazing transformation that has required each one of us to be innovative, to rethink how we conduct our job. We nurture well-being. We're committed to the well-being of our community. And I think that has been guiding everything we've done and will continue to guide as we think about how do we re-enter our campus. And of course, we're responsible stewards of our resources, and that's going to be even more relevant as we face again the economic impact of the COVID-19 situation. So we have been, as I mentioned, trying to look forward, trying to anticipate what's happening. Our new Executive Vice President of Administration and Finance, Kelly Fox, who's on the call and may participate in a minute, she and her team have been already projecting what the financial impact is going to be on Georgia Tech. And we've already identified very immediately between now and the next 2 months, at least $55 million of impact. And those $55 million come from the fees and the room and board and other fees that we have returned to the students, from a decline in study abroad fees and tuition, a decline in activity in Georgia Tech Lorraine, a decline in revenues for athletics, and the list goes on. So at least 55 million that we're going to face in the short term. It could be twice, it could be 3 times as much in the months following that during the summer. And again, of course, we're going to have to figure out what the impact on the state appropriation is. So I just don't want to sugarcoat it. We are going to be facing a difficult year from a financial standpoint, and we need to be ready to deal with it in the best possible way. Some of that is going to be buffered, if you will, because of some of the stimulus money that is coming from the federal government. But just to put it in context, that stimulus money is not going to be sufficient to. I mean, every penny we'll count and we'll make sure that whatever money is available, we'll try to bring the fair share for to Georgia Tech. But it's not going to be able to compensate. Most immediately, I think the CARES Act that was just enacted last week has provided some money for students mostly. So the formula that the federal government has used has allocated a little over 10 million to Georgia Tech. The first half of that is going to be available to us very immediately, but that's pass-through money to go to students with financial need or students who are facing difficult situations. That's sort of what we're going to be dealing with. So all in all, we are going to be facing a difficult situation financially, and I one of my messages to you is we have to, again, every penny counts, and we need everybody's contribution to help make sure that we travel this year financially as well as we can. Every dollar that we spend, we have to ask ourselves, can we do without that? Can that wait? Can that wait a year? Is that absolutely essential that we incur into that expense? My goal, our goal, has to be to protect our employment as much as we can, to protect everybody who's employed at Georgia Tech as much as we can. If we were to lose jobs, this is really a very bad economy to get reemployed. So our top goal is how do we reduce expenses so we can maintain employment, and that and everybody again has to participate and contribute to that goal. I know some of you have asked about are we going to have furloughs and the like. In fact, those were some of the questions that you submitted. And in fact, I think as I look at the list of Q&As, the most voted one is please address the potential for layoffs and furloughs, and I'm happy to do that. So clearly, our top goal is not to have to lose any jobs, not to have to do any layoffs. That's our top goal. So let's do everything we can to avoid that possibility. What do we need to do furloughs? It is entirely possible. I don't know, but it is entirely possible. But again, the more we do to retool our different processes, to restructure our activities, to streamline it, to find savings everywhere, the less we will need to rely on either furloughs or, of course, our absolutely last option, which will be to have to cut jobs. So that is our goal, and I really thank all of you for being part of that. Let me if you will, let me wrap up this part by sharing with you some thoughts about another part of this vision exercise that we went through, the strategic planning process, which was we wrote a new mission statement. I've always felt like every organization should have a concise, short mission statement that can help tell the world this is what we do, this is why we exist, this is why we get up in the morning. And that mission statement is we develop leaders, in Georgia Tech, we develop leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. That's what we do. And that sentence has been really a source of personal inspiration during the last few weeks, because I have seen how absolutely essential that mission has become in a situation like this. I mean, our mission has always been important. Human life is better than it's ever been with all the problems that we face, because we've been able to advance technology and do it in a way that improves the human condition. But when things get tough, when we face a crisis of this magnitude, it is obvious that it is through science and technology that we can make smart and creative decisions and help us deal with these challenges. So in the last few weeks, it's just been really terrific and inspiring and energizing to see how some of our faculty and our graduate students have just jumped on and tried to figure out how to use their own expertise to make contributions to help us fight this fight. You've seen many stories on the media and social media and even the traditional media. The New York Times had a nice video about some of this work. You've seen, for example, how some of our engineering faculty very quickly identified the need for personal protective equipment that was really in very short supply in hospitals in our very community, and they decided to use their expertise to design a prototype, to build a prototype. They took these face shields to local hospitals. They gathered feedback from nurses and doctors. They improved the designs. They produced a few thousand of them and to be distributed in all these hospitals. And then they also managed to find a manufacturer in Georgia that could elevate the production from just a few thousand to a few 100,000. And now Georgia is going to be producing this equipment, not just to satisfy the needs of the state, but also of other states through in collaboration with FEMA. I mean, that ability to sort of use our engineering capacity to solve a problem very rapidly, not just to have an abstract idea, but to solve a problem very rapidly, it has been just inspiring. And the list goes on, and later maybe our EVP of research, Shawi Abdallah, can share some other ideas. But it is terrific to see our alumni. I mentioned the testing site that is operating on our campus right now. Thanks again to the help of our facilities and our police department for making it work. Well, it turns out that the chairman of the board of CVS, our partner in this operation, is a Georgia Tech alum, and alumni just like him are calling us and saying, "How can I help? I have this idea." I'm having text messages and emails constantly with alumni who have resources, who have ideas. Sometimes it's just been, how can I contribute money to the Student Emergency Fund, or how can I help some of this research, or how can I help make sure that we find a new creative solution. So it's been fantastic, inspiring, energizing to see how our mission statement is not just a nice sentence, it's actually is really what we are about. And I'm incredibly proud to be working with you and with colleagues that are making such incredible contributions. Let me pause there and turn it back to you, Renee, and if you don't mind, maybe picking some of the questions that may be coming in.
Sure. So we have a few pre-submitted, but before we get to those, the next highly voted question on our Q&A is regarding hazard pay for essential workers who have come onto campus to do their jobs. There's a question regarding, will they receive that? So I thought I'd go ahead and ask that before we move into the topic of what does returning back to work look like?
So I maybe, I don't know if Kelly or Kim on the phone, if you want to address that.
Sure, I'm happy to address that. We have been looking at that very closely, and we've been working very closely with our partners at USG, and they are aware of the community and the different entities that are providing hazard pay. So it is a question that remains open and one that we are considering.
Great, thank you so much, Kelly. Looking at some of the questions that were submitted in advance and some that have come in online as well, there's a lot of, and I know you talked a little bit about this, that we're now looking ahead to what's next. The questions really are surrounding what does that look like if distance learning is continuing through the summer? Has a decision been made that campus is actually closed until then? And then are we supposed to continue working remotely? And then once we return, what are the safety precautions that are being put in place and the cleaning precautions that are being put in place for those who are on campus?
Yeah, those are great questions. So as you know, I mean, the order from the governor, the stay-at-home order right now is until April 30th. I mean, that's so this. I'm starting with what we know, and then I follow with what we don't know. So right now, I think the state of emergency lasts until mid-May. The stay-at-home is until the end of April. At the university system level, we have decided that all the classes this summer will be online. What we're trying to figure out is, which is, by the way, is absolutely the right thing, given all the uncertainty right now around the evolution of the infection, is the absolute right thing to do. By continuing online, we provide plenty of opportunities for our students to continue to progress academically without putting anybody at risk. By doing that also, it allows us to use the summer as we get more information about how things are evolving to start thinking about whether some functions can return to campus. And we'll have less pressure because the campus is going to be a lot less populated than it normally is. So it's going to allow us to even experiment with different approaches in different parts of our business. So the answer is, we don't know yet what the right timing would be. The current goal is to ensure that we're ready to teach, to go back to campus, to normal face-to-face teaching for the fall semester. But even that is just the current assumption. We don't know where the situation will be. But yeah, let's expect that during the summer, we may have an opportunity to start thinking about what functions can go back to operate to, if not to normal, to semi-normal. And when we do that, and that's what the COVID-19 task force that is chaired by our Senior Vice President and Chief of Staff, Frank Neville, and that involves people from the academic side and the administrative side from throughout the whole institute. That task force is now turning its attention precisely to those questions, which is, okay, if this group has to go back to campus, how does that work? What are the changes that we need to introduce, for example, in cleaning and disinfecting protocols, in social distancing, in even personal behavioral changes to make sure that those who return to campus are safe? So we're currently looking into all of that. And what I think the bottom line, the message for everybody is that whatever we do, whatever step we take in going from now to a more sort of normal situation, will be done with absolutely the safety and the health of our community as the top priority.
Thank you. So another question, one that came in offline again and online on his published questions, is about furloughs and that people are feeling like it could happen, even though we are looking at all of our options, and how they might be handled, top down or bottom up. Employees with more time or less time getting notified first, those with higher salaries taking pay cuts. Those questions continue to flow in on our live Q&A, so I thought we might want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as I said, right now, my top goal is to do everything we can to avoid layoffs, right? I mean, I cannot say it's absolutely impossible, no, because we don't know the facts, but that's our top goal. So I'm not even thinking about how we would do layoffs, because the goal is to avoid them. Furloughs are maybe a little bit of a higher possibility, especially if the impact from state appropriations and other sources are on the high end of what we're planning right now. And if we do that, we'll figure out a way to do it that is as fair as possible. I've had experience, unfortunately, like some of you have in prior recessions and earlier in earlier times in my career. And I think a form that has worked well in the past is to make sure that we do it in a progressive way, that those who have higher earnings maybe take a sort of a bigger hit, and those that have lower earnings take a smaller or even no hit if possible. So I think that has worked in the past, and I suppose that philosophy would work here, but it's still very premature. We don't know that we're going to need to get there. But if we do, again, the principle would be, let's do it in as fair as possible, and to ensure that people with the less resources, if you will, are as protected as we can.
Great. And another pre-submitted question about reopening is about the criteria we will utilize by the USG and by Georgia Tech to reopen, and how stakeholders will have the opportunity to comment on any decisions that are made or recommendations that are being made.
Yeah, so this is really the question that we're all asking ourselves. So to give you an idea, the University System Office has already created a committee with 4 or 5 presidents who are beginning to think again about different scenarios, and that's informed by guidance from the Department of Public Health and CDC and the like. I'm part of a task force, a working group with McKinsey, the consulting group, and we're also looking at what different scenarios might look like and how that might require different scenarios, may require different actions. So we're the best thing we can do right now, given that again we don't know what we don't know, and information is going to be fluid. Is first of all trying to be totally connected with the best possible sources of data. Follow all the guidance that we have from public health organizations at the state, national, and global level, and be prepared. Have different scenarios in mind so we can make the best possible decisions. But yeah, we have shown since I've been here, at least, I assume before as well. All the major decisions, I mean, even in this strategic plan, I mean, are based on inclusion, on hearing all the voices. The task force has been very inclusive from the beginning. We want to make sure that whatever decisions we make are as informed as possible, not just by that external guidance, but also by the knowledge and the experience of people on the ground.
And before we move into some questions for Dr. Abdallah about research, I did want to ask one more pre-submitted question about the 2 on-campus childcare facilities for employees. The question is whether or not these facilities will remain closed until Georgia Tech students return to campus, and if they'll reopen in time to serve the population that uses them, and then who decides that, Georgia Tech or the USG?
So I don't know if Kelly, you may have that information.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. We are working closely with USG on when to reopen things like the child care centers. We are definitely sensitive to the notion that as we begin thinking about restarting the campus, that tightly, closely aligned to that is how are we caring for our children? And so those decisions will not be made separate, but rather in consideration of the entire environment and closely with USG.
And Renee, I think I'm reading also a very interesting question, and I might ask in a minute the provost to jump in. But it's a question about, hey, when we come back, will we be able to telework, for example? And one of the things, and I am really more and more convinced that this experience, as hard as it is, and it is as stressful as it is, in a way, it is also going to help us grow stronger as a community, and it's going to help us even be more resourceful and innovative about how we do our work. So I don't know exactly, but for example, the fact that we have turned all of our instruction online before the COVID pandemic. Not every faculty at Georgia Tech had an experience teaching from a distance. Now 100% of our faculty do. And that is inevitably, and I think this is a great thing, is going to change the way we think about our own instruction. Every faculty member, even when we go back to campus, is going to be thinking about their classroom, their teaching differently. They're going to they have experienced different ways of conducting the work. I suspect the same thing is going to happen on the administrative and on the business side of Georgia Tech, that this is helping us see how business can maybe conducted in a more flexible way. Now, we're also going to probably learn how important it is for many things to be together and to be in the office and to be in contact with others, which I know many of us miss. But I suspect we're going to learn that there are different ways of conducting the work that may work just fine, or even perhaps even better than the traditional form. So, but with that, it might be a good opportunity to ask the provost to maybe share his thoughts about how this conversion of teaching is going to online, and what is sort of what are we learning so far from the experience.
Very good. Good afternoon, everybody, and I hope everybody's well. Indeed, I think, as President Cabrera stated, this experience will change us forever. There's no question that both in the delivery of the education as well as in the administrative side of the house, we have learned that there are different ways of achieving certain things. So sometimes by necessity, sometimes not perfectly. The move to delivery of education at the distance has been extraordinarily heroic by the students, by the staff, and by the faculty, but incredibly successful. Not to say that it hasn't been without obstacles and bumps on the road, and they're still occurring. But relatively speaking, it's been an incredible success story. So going forward, what I expect is that indeed there are lessons we have learned or are learning and will continue to learn throughout the summer in better ways on how to deliver education better and how to carry business in a more efficient way. And not to say that people will love to simply stay working long distance. In fact, most students, one of the most common comments I hear from the students I contact is, I want to see my colleagues. I want to go back. So it's not that human contact is unnecessary. On the contrary, it's becoming more and more real. But at the same time, they say, I'm impressed of what we have been able to do and what the faculty has been able to do. So we're learning. In the transition back, all expectation will be that we'll transition back in a gradual fashion, where some of the activity, both business and educational delivery and research, will be hybrid for a while as we manage the risk of bringing people back.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Ross, while you still have the floor, there are some comments on the Q&A about some Reddit threads where students are expressing unhappiness of taking their full course load remotely. And the question is really around how the Provost's office is handling complaints, academic complaints over the past few weeks and the coming weeks as withdrawal deadlines come closer.
Yes, well, we have actually put in place a quite efficient way of handling complaints. There's a person in my office, Kyla Ross, who receives all the complaints of students, and she then mediates and figures out what's going on, and we deal with it. Now, to put it in perspective, over I think last week and the week before, we may have gotten something like 30 such complaints. This week we are up probably 40, 50 such complaints. I'm not this full week, but last week I'm part of this week. The message is they're increasing. Now they're increasing for a variety of reasons. It's the end of the term, and generally complaints naturally go up then. And second, we're getting into exam periods and experiences that are new. So as we see more experiences, more problems occur. We are dealing with every single one of them with individual attention at all levels. The deans are involved, the faculty is involved, our office is involved. One complaint is probably one too many, but keep in mind that we're dealing with thousands and thousands and thousands of student teaching hours and faculty teaching hours in the tens of thousands levels and connections through Canvas and other media. So in a way, it is a sign of success, and in another way, is a sign that there are situations that we have not been able to solve, and we're working to solve them.
And maybe if I can follow up on that, Renee, I think I've seen on the list of Q&A, there's a question about our decision making in relationship with the university system. And I think very concretely, I think a reference to the issue about pass-fail, and you, as some of you are very well aware, many of our students have been advocating And I think the Georgia Tech students have had probably a leading voice in this, but they're not the only ones. Students from other universities in the system, which have been arguing for a move to either entirely to pass fail, or at least to give students an option to go from having a traditional like letter grade to pass fail. The reason why they're advocating for that is because the moment that we send our students back home, all of a sudden their circumstances may influence their academic performance, circumstances that have nothing to do with their potential. And that's why other universities around the country have decided to switch to pass fail. And now in that particular decision, that's one where the system has determined that should be a system-wide decision. For a number of reasons, they believe that first of all, there's some of the institutions within the system that would have difficulties making that transition for a host of reasons, and the system doesn't want some universities to provide something to the students and others not. There's also a concern around the impact on the HOPE scholarship. And by the way, most of our students, our in-state students, qualify for HOPE, and HOPE requires a sub-minimum GPA. So for a number of reasons, in that particular issue, the system decided that we would not transition to pass-fail, and that would apply to all of the institutions. What we've been doing, what the provost and the deans and the department chairs have been doing, is to work with the faculty to make sure that difference in circumstances for our students has the least possible impact in the performance. It is going to have impact, but trying to be, for faculty they're trying very hard to be understanding, to be sensitive, to be compassionate with students who might find themselves in different circumstances. They may not have a room at home where they can really lock themselves and concentrate and study, or they may not have as good an internet connection as others do, or they may be facing all sorts of family situations. So we're within the system-wide decision. We're trying to work as hard as we can to make sure we do right by our students. In other areas, the system has determined that it's better for each of our institutions to make our own decisions. One of those, for example, is the issue of tenure. As you know, our assistant professors are on a very tight schedule to be able to be granted tenure, to be evaluated and then granted tenure. And the pandemic has really, in a way, affected very negatively the work of many of our faculty members. In that case, the provost, in consultation with other members of the administration and with the faculty, is considering some changes that would help our faculty really, that would accommodate those issues on our faculty. So all that is to say that we are part of the system, and in some cases the system determines that a specific policy should apply to all of the institutions. In others, we're able to what we think is right for our community.
Great. So turning to research from that topic, there are some questions around addressing the predicted IRI impact as of now regarding employment and resuming research. Dr. Abdallah, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, let me first also give my thanks to everyone who's risen to the occasion to support the research efforts and the healthcare effort of the state and the nation. So regarding research, so obviously we're not expending as much money as we normally do. In fact, our February research expenditures were about probably 20% down. They'll probably be further down, mainly because we're not able to purchase stuff and we're not able to travel and do the other things because the research enterprise is still humming. We're still submitting proposals. We're still spending money on personnel because we had the approval from both the institute as well as the federal government to be able to charge, even though some people may not be able to do the work. You know, those who are working, who are delivering on their grants and contracts, that's not an issue. So if you are on a research grant right now, if it's a federal research grant, we've had no interruption, and we have the guidance from the agencies until the academic year, the end of the academic year. We're working with organizations such as the American Association of Universities and the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities to try to move that forward and to add money, because right now what we did get is the approval to spend the money, but not additional money, additional funds. Now, of course, in the CARES Act and others, there is money to try to support research, and we're competing for those. The one concern, or one of the main concerns, is really with industrial funding, industry funding. And we've had a couple of those industries who have canceled or stopped on some of their program and projects. So that's something we're looking. It's still small, but we're looking at it closely. In the long term, maybe 6 months or even maybe 3 months from now, we are going to see research money flowing from the federal side. But in the short term, I think we are seeing the impact of it, and therefore we're going to have to, like everyone else, to make sure that we're not spending beyond what we have. And to do so, we're focusing on people. So we're not allowing, for example, some of the larger purchases. We're saying delay it if you can, in order to keep the people we have employed and paid.
Thank you. I think in your answer, you answered a couple of the other questions that have come in. So I would love you, though, just to take a moment to explain some of the great research that has been done so quickly to address the challenges of COVID-19. Sure.
So our folks have started this work almost immediately, and we have, I'll group it in different buckets. So the first one is the physical face shields, the box, the ventilators, and so on. And we've done, as you heard from the president, some of our designs are being used all over the world. We open source all of them. We're delivering tens of thousands on our way to hundreds of thousands of these face shields across the US, and other people are printing them abroad. Testing is one area where we support the state. The state stood up a team to try to scale up testing. And this is not simply the test that's being done on campus, but these are the tests, the original one, the PCR, CDC approved test, and so on. So we have people come up with solutions to address the shortage of reagents, which came up very early in this process. We have folks working on disinfection. When we come back, we're going to need to disinfect, and we're going to need to continue to disinfect. So we have folks working on large-scale solutions, both for the institute but also for the state and the nation. We have very interesting work in the areas of modeling and policies and so on, out of ISYE and out of business and others. We have contact tracing apps that are being built and evaluated, and working with the CDC on some of those. And we have someone who's pivoted his research from working on vaccines for the influenza, and now he's doing testing on vaccines for COVID-19. So those are only some of the ones that we're talking about, or we're engaged in. There are many others I'm not familiar with as much. GTRI has been amazing in terms of what they're able to provide by way of research, by way of resources, but also by way of project management and supporting the state as well as the institute in trying to keep track and make sure that we're delivering on all of these.
Thank you.
And if I may, Renee, thank you. No, just to highlight some of those comments from Shawi Abdallah. First, I mean, I just want to once again to thank our colleagues from GTRI, and Shawi, you're so right that this is a unique element of Georgia Tech that is not that common in other universities. The fact that we have a very large, very a high-performing applied research entity within Georgia Tech puts us in an incredible situation to not just have good ideas, but take those ideas and put them into practice, and it's been just terrific. The second thing I wanted to also share is that very quickly, And this is another way in which everybody sort of came together. We looked for all the PPE, the masks, the gowns, all the protective equipment that we could find in every lab across Georgia Tech. Every lab, we searched everywhere, and we produce really hundreds of pounds of this equipment. And it's just an anecdote that I thought it was great. GMA sent a truck to pick up all the stuff that we were donating to the effort, and the truck was too small, so they had to actually go back and bring a bigger truck. It's like I love it. We were up there doing this, and not only our faculty and our labs, we're really looking everywhere to see how much of this protective equipment we could provide to the first responders, but also our alumni. I was very moved how early on our colleagues in the Shenzhen campus in China, they called us and said, the pandemic in China is now ebbing, and we have all this equipment that we had bought in case things got worse. We don't need it anymore. We're going to ship it to you. And also alumni from very prominent alumni that we have in Asia that also tried to figure out ways to, and they're shipping PPE, which of course we receive, and then we put at the disposal of G9 and make sure that it reaches the hands of the first responders. But it's been just fantastic to see. And the last thing, as I mentioned about collaboration, I'll share another anecdote. And so we received a call from our neighbors of Coca-Cola, and they had identified hundreds, actually thousands of pounds of laminated plastic. And they thought, we know that you're working on face shields. You may be able to use this plastic. It's like, oh, absolutely. So they sent a truck. And I went to campus when the load arrived, and we had our colleagues, we had the police helping with the delivery. We had our colleagues from facilities to really help take all that material into the lab. And then we had faculty and graduate students and lab technicians and really taking all that material and turn it into protective equipment, which is helping keep first responders safe, as you heard. And I thought coming back home after that day, said really it was a phenomenal case of collaboration, of partnership, of how every member of our community can make a big difference.
So I think we have time for about 2 more questions before we move to closing remarks. One that has been sitting in wait for a little while is, what is the responsibility or potential for the Georgia Tech Foundation to make up financial gaps in the Institute's budget?
So more than a responsibility, the Georgia Tech Foundation has the capacity, the potential, and the commitment to helping. They exist to help Georgia Tech. So the Georgia Tech Foundation is a separate, it's an independent entity, but they exist. Their mission is to support the mission of the institute. So from the very beginning, I've been in touch with the board of the foundation and with the head of the foundation, Al Trujillo, and we've been in constant communication. Some of the things we've done, we've created very quickly a couple of funds. One to support the emergent, some of the emergency needs of our students. We also created a fund to support the work that Shawi Abdallah has discussed and all the research that is happening. So the foundation has been our partner in setting up those vehicles so that some of our friends and can really continue to help invest in those areas where we need help. They're also managing our money very carefully. And I was very impressed that as they make financial decisions, because they invest our endowment and then the returns of that endowment are revert back to support the Institute, they've been making very careful and very smart decisions. So while the stock markets around the world have been incredibly volatile and they have lost a lot of value, the performance of our endowment has really held in a very positive way. So one of the biggest things they can do is to make sure that the money keeps flowing when we need it. And I think they're really providing those results, and I'm very grateful for the work they're doing. And then some of the members of the board of the foundation on an individual level, people who had pledges to give us money, and some of them have come to us and said, I know you need the money now, so I'm going to accelerate the payment on my pledge so that you get the cash faster than you had anticipated. So I have nothing but great gratitude towards what the foundation is doing to help us.
Excellent. And then lastly, a couple questions about the strategic plan. So you mentioned in your opening remarks that we're continuing to look forward. You mentioned the new mission. There's a question about, has this impacted the timing of launching that plan? And then also, what about our resilience plans and the campus community being part of our going forward resilience plan? With the sentiment that this would be a great way to continue the inclusivity and culture change for our campus.
Sure. So on the strategic plan, sure, for in the middle of March when we made the decision that we had to move to online instruction, that required everybody's 150% attention. So we had to put the strategic plan on pause for a little bit. But last week or a couple of weeks ago, we decided, this might be important that we restart the process. And we discussed it with the two deans who are co-chairing the effort, Dean McLaughlin and Lavi, and they agreed. It's like, we should keep it moving. So we, as you have seen, we have created several working groups. There have been tons of interest and a lot of people volunteering to serve on some of those groups. Selection of members have been has been completed. Those groups have been formed. Leaders for each of those groups have been created. And last week they had their first meeting with the chairs and of each of the groups and the chairs of the task force in our consulting group and so on. And I was not part of that meeting, but I discussed it with the chairs of the effort at the end, and they said, this was the right thing to do. It is so important for us as a community, as we work on the day-to-day emergency, that we keep thinking long term, that we keep thinking forward, that we realize that actually we will get through this successfully, and that we need to be thinking about how do we move the Institute forward. So it was not only a very productive meeting, I'm told, but it was in some ways therapeutic for those involved to turn our attention to that. So I was delighted, and I'm delighted to see that the effort continues. And on the returning back, I think the same philosophy of inclusion, of hearing all voices, I think that principle is going to continue to be utilized. As I said earlier, we received lots of signals from organizations and experts outside of the Institute, inside of the Institute. But when we're trying to make practical decisions, it is essential that we hear the voices of the people who have that, who are in the front lines and who have that expertise. So you have my commitment that we will continue to listen to our community as much as we can.
Thank you. So in closing, I know you'll want to make a few closing remarks. There are still some questions. I know you've answered this throughout, but if you could just in your wrap up also address furloughing and pay cuts one last time, just to make sure we've answered all the questions that were asked that we could in this format.
Yeah, no, thank you. And again, I think too, I like to be, whenever I've worked in an organization, I've preferred to be treated as an adult and not get anything sugar-coated. And I think that's what I've been trying to do today. This year is going to be tough. The financial implications of the pandemic are going to be hard, and they're going to be noted. This is going to be a significant sort of hit on our financials, and we all need to be prepared to deal with that. But again, we have to be doing what we've been doing so far, which is look at the situation, be creative, be responsible, be patient, be flexible, but not to panic, just like we didn't panic with what happened here. We don't know at this point what measures will be needed. What we do know is that the more careful we are with our expenses, the less we're going to have to do in terms of furloughs. And absolutely, our goal must be that we don't cut any jobs at Georgia Tech. That should be our goal. So I really count on everybody's contributions, thinking about how do we do our business better, and how can we save money everywhere in the operation of the institute. So I think that's with everybody's contribution, I'm really confident that we can hopefully avoid losing any jobs. And just in closing, what I would share is once again is my deep gratitude for everything that you've done. I realize how difficult this situation has been. We have never dealt, and none of us has really the memory of, and we've gone through some issues in the past, but we don't remember anything like this. And yet to see how all of you have stepped up to the moment, have done your part to balance your own uncertainties in your families and your personal lives, and yet get the job done. Keep the interest of Georgia Tech in mind, the well-being of our community, the interest of our students, the learning of our students as our top priority has been just simply inspiring to me, energizing. I am incredibly proud of being part of this community. I am incredibly grateful for being part of this community, and very confident about the future. And as I mentioned earlier, convinced that when we come out of this, in many ways, we will be a stronger community. Thank you for everything that you do for Georgia Tech and our students.
Thank you, President Cabrera. Thank you, Dr. Bross, Dr. Abdullah, Kelly, Dr. Harrington. We appreciate you joining us today and taking the questions. We will post this recording as soon as it gets processed, likely tomorrow. And we will also post as all the questions in our FAQ on our Georgia Tech COVID-19 page. So if your question did not get answered, you can look there to see if it's answered on that page. Again, we thank you for your attendance and hope you have a great day.